at the end of it, you'll have a summary of the presentation because there'll be no recording in the breakout rooms. And we do it because we want to make sure we share also with our teacher candidates as well. But I see faces and I want to honor some of those faces that I see and names. I see you, Jeff Stickney. I see you, Dr. Clelly. I see you, Mairi. I see you, Mairi Reed. I see you, Stephen Reed. And I see you, a lot of the names I'm seeing. And I'm sitting here listening to the song that we started our presentation with. I'm sitting here listening to the song that we started our presentation with. And my energy, can we not share the screen as yet, Marie, please? Marie, thank you. And my energy, thank you. My energy really shifted. I could feel, something we talk about, I could feel when my energy shifted. And immediately, and this is something that I know I'm honored to feel, immediately, just a level of love. I can feel it right now. See it, I feel it. There's a level of love poured onto me as I see some of you walked in the room. I saw fire walked in the room in the form of Dr. Clelia Rodriguez. I saw love and solidarity walk in the room in the form of Professor Mairi Reed. I see the energies in the room, and because of that, my energies now is moved even to another level. But I want to stop before we start anything else to say a special welcome to our board partners. I see you. I see so many names. When I'm seeing the names, I'm saying, oh, that's TDSB, that's York Region, oh, that's Simcoe County. I was like, oh, that's Alton, because I'm seeing you. And I want to say welcome. So I'm going to ask you to do me a big favor this time. I'm going to ask you to do me a big favor this time, or a little favor, or a sweet favor. I just want you to put in the chat, because the chat is open. This is not a closed session. I want you to put in the chat which school board you're coming from. And if you're not coming from a school board, I want you to put if you're MT candidate. I want to put if you're a professor. I want to put if you're from another university. If you are just sweet, good old community that is showing up. I see you. I see you, Peel. I see you, Durham. I see you, Durham Catholic. I see you. I see you. I see you. Welcome into this space. I see you. I see you. And thank you so much. You're joining us for yet in another of our series in racial justice in teacher education. And I am honored. Mairi, I'm going to share. Mairi is going to share her screen because she's going to speak first. So, Mairi, go ahead. You can share your screen. And I want to welcome you as we engage in this conversation in embracing and engaging in racial justice in teacher education towards racial literacy in urban teacher education, towards getting a space. Mairi, you could share your old screen. We're seeing everything. In order for us to grow. And when I think of this, the first thing I think about as we get into this conversation, the first thing that comes to my mind in my welcome, I want to share this, is implications for our practice. What is all of this for? Is it an afternoon to come in, maybe have a cup of tea? I'm having a cup of tea, and I'm teaching, and I'm talking, I'm seeing people. Is that why we are here? Like I start to say to myself, why are we here? Why did you log in? Other than that, you got an invite. What is the genuine purpose behind why you are here? And I think about the need for actions. I'm listening to CP24 today, and I heard another incident of racism happening to a 12-year-old child. And I'm sitting down and I'm saying to myself, as an educator, as a teacher, as a parent, as a professor, as a community leader, when you are hearing this, what are coming up for you? And my questions before we even get into anything is, what will you do with all of this? Will it be, wow, that was a nice talk with Dr. Campbell and Mairi. That was good, Mairi. That was good, the stuff that Mairi shared with us, and all the resources that Mairi put in the chat. Wow, that was good. That's all you're going to do with it? Or how will you act? How will you create belonging in your class? But more than that, how are you disrupting and dismantling hate, racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Asianism, anti-Asian hate, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, it's homophobia? How are you? What is your real work? So before we get into anything else, we're going to get into this. I want to introduce myself, Dr. ABC, Dr. Andrew B. Campbell. and I am the professor here at teaching stream, Professor Teaching Stream of Racial Justice in Teacher Education. And I'm joined by Mairi, sorry, I keep on saying Marie, of course. Mairi, like calamari, she'll tell you that.
That's it. That's
Mairi
right.
Edwards, who is our coordinator for diversity, equity, and student experience. And I know somewhere within Mairi's conversation with you, you're going to hear about the little things that are intentional, which are indeed the bigger things for me. So Mairi, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, y'all. Thank you so much for the welcome. And I want to be upfront. My technology is doing some things. So if things happen in places, you're teachers, you've done this, you know what it's like. So I want to be upfront about that happening. So I invite just folks to take a moment. And if you have your cameras on, I invite you to turn your cameras off for a moment if you'd like, just to have a moment to go inside and to just to tune in. Just invite folks to tune in with themselves for a moment. Maybe for you, it's a breath. Maybe for you, it's taking a little walk around or some jumping up and down. Maybe it's to write a note for something you need to do later. Maybe it's just grabbing a bite to eat. Anything that's just allowing you to come into the space a little bit more. I invite you to take a moment to connect with how is land around you right now? What is the land that you have walked on today? Have you looked at it out a window if you have sight available? What are the ways that you are in relationship with the land today? What are you grateful to that land for? I was taught that by my friend Michael that the Anishinaabe word aki, is not just land, it's also those things that grow out of it, the things that live on it, the air. So I invite you just to think about that and how you have interacted with it today. I want to start with this appreciation. Today, I'm feeling really grateful for trees. I went for a brisk walk outside. It was brisk, it was cold, but I felt just so grateful to live in a place where I can hear them. Their steadiness and how long they've been there just always moves me and makes me feel grounded and connected to the ways that I come to this land. And I have been asked by those who I'm in relationship with here to make sure that I follow this protocol of a land acknowledgement and to read this particular version that has gone through a protocol with the Elder Circle and the university leaders. And it says, I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I come to this land from those who were displaced and brought against their will through Jamaica, and on the other side, fleeing colonization from Ireland. And I have had an experience here that is different than so many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people on this land. I experienced privileges that are profoundly different. So we want to make sure that we're always asking ourselves, what are we acknowledging? I've offered in your handout some resources, and in one of the films that's linked there, it asks us to think about what are we acknowledging when we think about a land acknowledgement? What history, what erasure, what experience are we remembering? And making sure that it is honoring the thousands of years that people have lived and cared for on this land, but also making sure that we are thinking about the current realities of violence and the action that we must make sure we are a part of doing. And if we are going to have this conversation about social justice, it has to start on the land, and it has to start with the very current realities on this land, and particularly thinking and understanding what this means in relation to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. With this, I invite us just to take a moment and think about, what are we acknowledging? We'll have time to keep on coming back to these questions as we move. Time is also a colonial concept, and we are going to make sure that we are also being careful with your time. one of the things that I invite you to be thinking about as we go along with this conversation is, yes, this is just one way that you can keep your notes organized or keep your thinking going, is to think about the content of what we're talking about, but be constantly thinking about action ideas. We are a community of colleagues coming together, having this conversation. We're learning from one another. So I very much invite you to be thinking about, what can I learn from what each other? There's that thing that someone said that really got me going or made me realize something I'm already doing. Those action ideas, please keep recording them. Also, the personal reflections. This work is profoundly personal. So how can we keep on thinking about that personal component? I will flip to this slide. Let me see. So go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mairi. Thank you absolutely so much. And as you said, we invite you to turn on your cameras if you want to come in and out. It's all good. And as we talk about what our conversation today, what I want us to also be mindful of is, how are we going to be having this conversation? And so we're engaging in what we call a courageous conversation. And I think you have heard that a lot. And I think a lot of us do not know what it means. Let me start with that. I think we hear the word courageous conversation a lot. And if we are not careful, we are so good at borrowing and jumping on the newest terminology that we forget that these words are important and they have actually actions. So what is a courageous conversation? It is one which you're going to have this afternoon, where part of this conversation, you will also walk away thinking, well, what can I do? But not only what can I do, how am I accountable? And not just how am I accountable, but how have I been complicit? And not just how have I been complicit, but how have I not acted, or how have I acted? I was reading a script today, or going through editing a book that is going to be coming out by myself and Professor Larry. And somewhere in it, someone talked about, well, I could actually say the person, because the person is there, Dr. Mairi Reid voice. Dr. Mairi Reid voice is in it. And she shared, and when you get that book, you're going to read that part, when she shared about a time when she should have spoken up and she did not. And I laughed when I read it because it was so powerful. It resonated with me so much, Professor Mairi Reid. I want to honor your voice. It resonated with me so much. But you know what resonated with me, and I get goosebumps thinking about it? When I was reading this morning, about 6:30 a.m. this morning, I was in the Blue Mountains and I was ready. My mind went back to you, Dr. Mairi Reid, Professor Mairi Reid. And I'm thinking, the work you are doing right now listen carefully, everybody, in racial solidarity. The work you are doing in racial solidarity, the courageous conversations you are having in racial solidarity, the kind of conversations you are boldly doing, Professor Mairi Reid, in anti-Asian hate and disrupting that. And then I looked at what you wrote in the book that will be published this year. And you were so authentic and honest about your journey and a time when you wanted to speak up and maybe didn't speak up. And I laughed and I said to myself, but look at you today. And we're going to get to that later on. We're going to get to that journey. Where are you on the journey? I'm going to go deep into that later on. I'm going to go deep into that later on. And if Mary, I want you to get ready, Professor Mairi Reid, just 2 minutes on the clock. If you need to jump on when I get back the mic later on, I'll invite you to jump on the mic to talk about even 2 minutes in this journey. I know this is unplanned, but that's how my spirit leads. That's how the ancestors tap me on my shoulder, and I know who you are. About the journey, because we are all on a journey. And I want us to realize how intentional we must be on this journey. I know I'm talking to teachers, Mairi, so I have to get into this a little bit, Mairi, as I'm talking to teachers. I'll cut down something else later on. But I want to say to teachers, oh, you are here listening to me. I know a lot of you, I am honored. When I said I'm honored, I mean I'm honored and humble to know I am admired and respected by many of you. But I want to let you know, like I've shared in so many of my workshops, the things that I did 15 years ago as a young teacher, or 20 years ago, that I was told to do because this was the way you do it. And after a while, I've learned how to unlearn those things. Unlearn those things. So let me ask you a question. What are you unlearning? Or your pedagogy is so great that for the last 30 years you've been teaching, you're amazing, you need to unlearn nothing. Because if that is your response, and I'm sensing a lot of cultural arrogance and the lack of cultural humility, how are we learning and growing as educators? How are we changing our tools? How are we tooling, retooling, adding new tools and taking out some tools out of our toolbox, Mairi, and say, you know, you all know me enough to know this is how I play. Taking out some toolbox out of our tool and go, well, this is useless. This is stink with colonization and colonialism. This has no purpose. This is actually deficit. How are you taking that toolbox and unpacking it? I feel the ancestors on my shoulders. I have to go ahead. So we have to determine our journey, and I want us to determine our actions. And this is my favorite part here, preparing teacher candidates for the journey in racial justice. This is why we did this. This is why Mairi and we started this work way back in July. And we were intentional about what we're going to do. The MT program, our leadership, the MT program, we talk about how we are preparing our teacher candidates. But here is one thing I want to leave with you. As we prepare our teacher candidates, how are we preparing ourselves? I hope you got that. As we prepare our teacher candidates, how are we preparing ourselves? And so today, I want to remind you, there's an article I'm going to leave in the Dropbox. I'm going to leave that. We're going to have quite a bit of stuff in the chat for you. One of the things I want to leave in the chat is a video about courageous conversation principles. But I want to leave with you these principles as you get into these, not today, but every day and outside in your classrooms and in the community. Remember to come prepared to learn, come prepared to unlearn. Check our biases, prejudice, privilege. I'm going to add to that. Check your hate. Check the things that you are bitter about that you know nothing of. Check the things that upset you about others. Check how maybe you have been blind to cultural competence. Check how you have done things that you are now want to unlearn. I want us to be honest. We're not going to tiptoe around these conversations. I'm going to tell you why we won't tiptoe. There's a lot of tiptoeing going on. There is a lot of tiptoeing going on. There's a lot of performance going on. There's a lot of statements without action going on. There's a lot of apologies without accountability going on. So we are not here to do that. We are here to stay engaged. And when you experience a discomfort, I'm sure Mairi's going to share with you maybe another strategy, because not all of us can use the same strategy. But I say to you, I hope and trust you'll get to a place that when you're in spaces like these and the conversation gets very uncomfortable for you, or some kind of discomfort because you're listening to truths and somebody else's story. I trust and hope you know how to handle that and be brave in handling that. Be bold in handling that, but be full of love in handling that. And let your actions speak louder than your words. We're going to definitely get into some conversation. We have 2 hours in this afternoon. And Mairi, it's going to be over to you as you get into talking about our introduction and some of those other points as we get into it.
Thanks so much. So we want to invite you to have right off the bat, right from the beginning, some opportunity to talk with one another. One of the things, this work is about is conversation. We'll talk about that in a few moments. So we want to invite you, we're going to put you into breakout rooms for 5 minutes, and we're just going to invite you to talk to one another. If you so choose, you can introduce yourselves a little bit more personally, your name. If you choose, you can share your pronoun. I'm putting this into the chat right now. We want to make sure that we're really clear about the practice of pronouns. They are optional. We may not have created a space yet where people feel that it is safe enough to disclose that information. We may not be worthy of that information yet, but we do want to make sure that we offer it as an opportunity, because we may not be able to look at you or know your name or hear your voice and know what pronoun to use. So if you want, you can use your name, your pronoun, anything we can do to make maybe a moment of reflection of anything we can do to make the environment a little bit better for listening. Closed captions are available for those who want, but please feel free to private message us also if there's anything we can do. And I'm going to invite you to share something that you're good at. Yeah, really. I just want you to think about anything that you're good at and to share it. And if you are, maybe it is you have really figured out how to teach grade 9 integers. Like maybe that's what it is, but maybe it's knitting, right? Maybe it's something else. So I just invite you to come into the conversation as a community of people with tools and resources, because we need all of us. So we're coming to you into this space. We need all of us. So you're just going to have 5 minutes in a breakout room to introduce yourselves and chat a little bit. We'll see you back in a few minutes.
Wonderful. Rooms are open, and please remember that the rooms, we don't record our rooms.
And here we all are back. Hello. Hello. Welcome back into the space. I'm just going to give everybody a moment to readjust. Hello, welcome back to the space. I hope you had even just a little conversation. I invite folks to just mute yourself if you haven't. So welcome back to the space. We're going to be doing quite a few breakout rooms through the discussion. This is just our first one to give us a chance to kind of.
Sorry, on mute, Mairi. Mairi, on mute, sorry. I'm going to mute everyone.
Thanks so much, folks. And let me know if it happens, because like I said, we're having a day. So we just wanted to make sure that folks have a chance to get to know each other, just have that moment to feel out the space, to make the transition into the space and to see how they feel in it. So now we want to there'll be plenty of breakout rooms. There'll be more of these throughout the evening. So now we want to practice. You're invited into a practice that some of you may use in your classes all the time. In this context, we're calling it a free write. So in this context, it's practicing just recording your thoughts. It could be writing, typing, dictating, mind mapping, doodling. It could just be letting your mind wander. And you're doing it privately in response to a prompt without editing it for a particular amount of time. And we're going to do it for 1 minute. Okay. So the prompt that I'm going to offer you is based on a book, some of the questions that Dr. Celie Ruiz in collaboration with on the book called Advanced Racial Literacies and Teacher Education Activism for Equity in Digital Spaces. And I'm going to put that contact information in the chat in a moment. This is the first question that they offer. Okay, so I'm going to invite us to take 1 minute of just reflecting on this question on our own first. So here is the question. What are some of your first memories involving race? And was it your race or was it someone else's? So you have 1 minute to just privately on your own. You're not going to be sharing your work. Just privately reflect on these questions. What are some of your first memories involving race? And was it your race or someone else's? I invite you to start to finish up whatever thought or drawing or dictation that you're involved in. And now I'm going to invite you to just go over what you've written or reflect back, identify any themes, and is there maybe one thing that you could share with your colleagues in a breakout room? In just a moment, we're going to go into a breakout room for another 6 minutes. And we're just going to have some discussion. We're starting the process off. We're going to practice the kind of conversations that we're talking about. So while you're selecting what you're going to share, because everybody's going to have a different decision about what's okay to share in this space, I want to say that it's hard sharing. It is part of the practice that we're talking about, which is being in conversation with one another, being outside of what is comfortable. And I want to be upfront and honest that the vulnerability that is so often celebrated, not all of us have the same experience of it, right? And not all of us are granted the excitement for being vulnerable. So you are your best judge. Choose what is okay to share in the space, but I want to offer you the challenge to move outside of what is comfortable, to practice these kinds of discussions that Dr. ABC just referred to. So now you're going to go into breakout rooms and you can choose what you decide to choose about your reflection on these 2 questions. We'll see you back in 6 minutes. Thanks. Hello and welcome back. Hi, everybody. We're just waiting for everybody to come on back.
Just when it starts getting juicy, like it just gets cut off. Like,
don't worry, the next breakout rooms are longer.
and it stops usually when Norman is beginning to like get into the juicy part that is like,
Well, the next ones you're going to have more time. So get your thoughts ready. The next breakout rooms, you'll have a little bit more time. So welcome back, everybody. And I just want to give folks a moment to just reflect on the conversation that you just had. Were there any themes that came up, things that were new, things that moved you? I just want to invite, in case there's anything that people want to share, just want to share the space as a community of colleagues. Is there anything that anyone wants to share? You don't have to. If you want, you can write it in the chat. You could private message me and I can read it without. Ken McNally, go for it. Ken, I see your hand up. You can put your hand up as demonstrated by Ken. Also, feel free to use the reaction button. Ken, go for it.
Hi, everyone. I thought I'd just jump in real quickly. I'm the partnership coordinator, so some of the emails that you've all received have come from me. In our breakout room, we talked about white saviorism and just how, you know, how easy it was to look back on, you know, our own childhoods. A couple of us talked about our experiences in churches, sponsoring families from other parts of the world who were essentially refugees fleeing crisis, and how there was kindness and there was charity, but there was it was also from this stance of superiority, this stance of here we are with our lives together, able to charitably support people from elsewhere who are different than us. And there was no intentional, you know, teaching us a position of superiority. I don't recall that part of a message from my parents, but it was implied somehow, and explains in part the white savior approach that many of us feel.
Thanks so much. And this is, I mean, this is so key in this, right? The assumption of knowing. And also an important concept here as well, the distinction between intent and impact, right? We can have all the right intents, but the impact can still be profoundly damaging and harmful, right? Yeah. Does anyone want to build on that? Maybe just one or two more comments. I'm seeing that there is some, also thanks for the private messages, also saying that there is really good conversation. And I see also in the chat, considering how Black individuals and people of color in my group identified their first memories of race is related to the sense of being different from others, while the first memories of race that I and others white people in the group had were largely about other people. Yeah, I'm seeing some kind of folks agreeing with this, right? So this distinction, this question about was it the distinction of being othered. When I think about my initial reactions, I have very profound memories of the experience of being othered, particularly around my hair, which was a giant afro at the time. It was very full and fabulous, right? And how that was related to, right? And that being outside of what is normal.
I think Mairi, hopefully I'm calling your name correctly. I think that concept that you just spoke about still exists, because there's still schools in Toronto that where the diversity that are diverse, but that diversity is very white. And so when a racialized or a Black person going to that school, you know, it's actually creates a lot of soul searching among the populations in those schools. I mean, I'm a Black principal in a school that is very rich, very wealthy. Social demographics of the school doesn't look like an urban inner city school. I'm on the Toronto Islands, on Center Islands. I'm the principal of a school on the island. And I know for sure that this particular topic is important because racial literacy is something that starts from very, very young, and it's how do we create a culture of racial literacy where all of our students can see race from very young and talk about it, identify it, and look at it. And the question that was asked is a pretty incredibly interesting question, like, you know, what are people's first memories with race? Depending on who it is, the answer would be different. I didn't respond to it for intentional reasons.
Yeah. And looking at the comments in the chat also, right? That it depends on, you know, there's different experiences of how to answer this. And Michelle Grace Williams is also pointing out another one, acknowledging the leadership and the professors in the space. The internalized racism begins in the early years and must be addressed early, right? That experience so early that it changes how we understand the possibility for ourselves, right? And Dr. Rodriguez saying I was born racialized, so it's something I have always known. So just I invite us, as you know, take a moment to, what is something that you want to take from this conversation right now as we move, and as Dr. ABC takes us into the next part of our conversation.
Thank you so much, Mairi, for that. And as we go along, you'll notice Mairi and I myself keep placing quite a bit of stuff in the chat. And that first video I'm placing there is from our Courageous Conversations comment that I've made. And so we want to continue getting to the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing. And I see you, many other professors have joined us. I see you, Victoria Baxon. I see you, Michelle Grace Williams. And I heard you clear and loud and clear, Gary, principal there. Thank you so much for being in the space with us. And it's something, what I loved, what you said, Principal Gary, is as we're getting to this conversation about our journey, where are we going? What are we doing? How will we get there? You know, if we are honest about this journey, you know, I talk a lot about Black joy, and somebody asked me the other day, what does Black joy mean to me? And I was, you know, we're talking about stuff, and they said, but do you ever get sad? And I said, have you ever seen me sad? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because of the journey in equity, the journey in disrupting, the journey in racial justice. And I put this picture there for a reason, because I want us to consider, if when you take on this work, if this is what you consider to be the journey, you know, it's a smooth road. I use this picture quite a bit in my workshops. I know many of you have seen this picture before. Is it a smooth road? I think a lot of us wish that it would be like this. This is a smooth road, good weather. You put your car windows down, maybe have yourself a drink, and you're just chilling. And the truth is, I'm saying this, I think that is a way a lot of us maybe have approached the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, the work of disrupting and dismantling anti-Black racism and Islamophobia, homophobia, to think that it is going to be this kind of journey, a smooth journey, and a task that we could really check off. And I see a lot of frustration because we are not checking off that box easily, because we are realizing that it is not that easy. And so the race in racial justice looks more like this for many of us, or what this looks like what the journey is supposed to be. It is tangled. It is messy. It is, today you think you're getting there and then something happens. It is a tons of calls I've gotten from school about racial slurs and hate in school, homophobia and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and something happened here and something happened here. And a teacher did this and a teacher said that. And this book was used and this assignment was given. It is quite a bit of stuff happening. But one thing we have to realize, as I talk about courageous conversation, we talk about staying engaged. We talk about learning and unlearning. How do we detangle, so to speak, or untangle some of this? It's going to be through our learning, our unlearning. It's going to be through our advocacy, our allyship, our activism. It's going to be about our love and care, respect for each other. It's going to be about how we create a sense of belonging. We hear a lot about safe spaces in school, and I think a lot of us get carried away with the term safe spaces as if we are responsible for just snapping our finger and it becomes safe. And now we are realizing more and more the work that has to be placed into a school, into a space for it to be safe. And so the journey is like this. But what I want to encourage us, wherever you are in the journey, I know many of you are here. I went in one breakout room and I heard somebody said, you know, it's a long day. I get it. I get it. But what I smile when you said that, and you know yourself, I smile because I said to myself, well, you are here. It's been a long day, but you showed up. This is totally voluntary. There's nobody in this room who is forced to be here. Not one of us is forced to be here. Well, I myself and Mairi, we are the presenters. We have to be here, I guess. But nobody else is forced to be here. I see you, Ken McNeely, Dr. Ken McNeely, sitting in your car, parked up somewhere, and engage in this conversation, because it is necessary that we prepare our teacher candidates for the work in racial justice, for the work in disrupting anti-Black racism and anti-oppressive practices, but also that we prepare ourselves. And that is what I've noticed, Ken, is that the more I do this work, the more I am learning, the more I am unlearning, the more I am able to reflect. The other day, Dr. Clelia Rodriguez, who is with us, asked me a question, and that question was asked in the form of a presentation. It took me a couple of days to settle on the question, but it was such a powerful question, and the question was, who are you without colonization? We have to understand, we talk about race, so much of what we know, so much of what we do, so much of how we act comes from that. And so I want you to know that if you are not parked up, this is a dangerous place to be parked up. This is not dangerous. This is dangerous. Parked up, in action, being complicit, not doing the work, not caring about the work, using a checkbox, thinking one book club is going to do it. I've seen a lot of work in racial justice, and it has boiled down to a book club. It's boiled down to one conversation. There are people who have pushed hard at me, Dr. Ken McNeely, because they want to attend one workshop. And when they attend that one workshop, they are so big on having me sign a certificate, Dr. McNeely, to say they attended one workshop in racial justice. And I know exactly where this is going. And I've been very strong, very honest, very brave in saying, I get it. I get it. We have been forced to do a one talk so it looks good on our resume as we go to our next promotion as principals, vice principals, senior teachers, wherever we want to go. But we have not intentionally engaged in the work of racial justice. And so at this time, I want us to understand that this background, this picture of the tanglement is important. But I've always said, working anti-Black racism, working equity is hard work, but it's also heart work. And with that being said, I'm going to invite Professor Mairi Reed. I want to invite her. As I said, I know I put her on the spot, but she said, okay, I put her on the spot. And I said to join me on Professor Mairi Reed. And I'm going to put that video later on. We did a conversation on racial justice. And we did a beautiful conversation on solidarity. We had that conversation, and I'm going to give you a copy of that video later on in the chat. But Dr. Mairi, take 2-3 minutes for us and explain to me what inspired you to write that perspective that you wrote in the book that is coming out. Because I'm going to tell you this morning, 6:30 in the Blue Mountain, in my room in the Blue Mountain, it touched me. It touched me big time. I had no idea you were coming this afternoon. I had no idea I was going to see you. I was waiting to tell you maybe next 2 weeks when I see you how that touched me. And now you are here. And I'm not going to wait to tell you how that thing you wrote touched me. And I want you to share with us some more about this work in racial justice and why this is such a urgent work, a powerful work, and a needed work, please.
Thank you, Dr. ABC. It is such an honor to be here and to be in the midst of such amazing educators. Wow, you have, I think, over 100 people here. This is a powerful space, powerful. I'm feeling the energy. I'm feeling the beautiful hard work happening in this moment. The little memory that I shared was something that I regret, and I regret deeply. I did not speak up when I could have. And you know what? And I was my first year teaching at OISE. I was teaching a math class. So I felt that perhaps it wasn't the right time because we were supposed to be, I was supposed to be teaching teacher candidates how to teach math. And I had a huge agenda to cover, lots of content. And I was overhearing while I was setting up my classroom, a few of the teacher candidates talking about the late Rob Ford. And he was a counselor at the time, and it was in front page Toronto Star. And this was a long time ago. This was 2008. And he said something about those Asians. He actually said those Orientals, they work so hard, they sleep by their machines, and they're going to take over the world. So paraphrasing, but those are basically the words that he said. And he refused to apologize. And the students felt that that was not a racist rant that he had. That the students felt, and some of the students were Asian themselves, some of them identified as Chinese, said that he's saying good things about them. It's a positive stereotype. There's nothing wrong with what he says. He doesn't need to apologize. And my heart sank. And I think I went white as a ghost, but I didn't know what to do. It was my first year. I didn't have any sort of training or opportunity to discuss how do we confront these racist views from teacher candidates. And I could have said, do you know the model minority myth? Do you know how that leads to the erasure of anti-Asian hate and oppression? Did you know that the model minority myth impacts the mental health of Asian students across Ontario and beyond? I could have engaged them in a discussion, but I didn't. So ever since then, I have regretted the opportunity to have a discussion, a whole class discussion. I could have done it, but I didn't. I just went right into my math lesson. So that's what my little memoir was about. And I just hope that if anything, if you walk away today from this story, just don't walk away feeling that you're going to regret. Take the opportunity to disrupt, dismantle, especially if you have that teacher power and that privilege to impart. You know, we need to embody the work. And I'm saying this from Dr. ABC's actual work. He talks about embodiment. How do you embody this heartfelt work? It has to come from the heart. There's no manuscript, there's no checklist. It really has to come from who you are and your love and what matters to you. And if equity matters to you, if racial justice matters to you, then take the opportunity to make these lessons and really deep and long lasting.
Thank you so much, Professor Mairi. But what is so beautiful, I just put our interview that we did in racial solidarity in the box. So everybody's gonna see that. Please click on it, save it on your desktop. Don't listen it now, you're listening to us, and you're gonna listen that later. And that was one of our powerful connections. And I'm still creating some of those, so there's gonna be more to come. But that was a powerful conversation we talk about in racial solidarity. And there's so much work that Professor Mairi Reid is doing in that area. But I want you to realize why I intentionally asked her that level of humility and vulnerability that I admire in Professor Mairi Reid. She was able to come on camera here to share with you that missed opportunity. But guess what? There is no any more missed opportunity. And so thank you so much. And as we get into this conversation, so I'm going to piggyback on what Professor Mairi Reid said, and I'm going to ask you this question. When we hear conversations about racial justice and why this work is important, one of the things I've asked many institutions and spaces I've been in, I've said, how many missed opportunities you have had? And when I say that to people, I think when I talk about racial justice, I think a lot of us, even who are here, may feel like I am asking you to do this big task. I find that educators, when I do a lot of workshop, which I've been so blessed to do, sometimes they say to me, Dr. Campbell, I feel so pressured. I feel it's so heavy. I feel so a great responsibility. All of that is important. And all those feelings are important. But what is also important to know is what Professor Mairi Reid just said, using your power as an educator to create a space where students feel safer, feel braver, feel more loved, more cared for, feel like my teacher sees me. I've always said I have a ton of awards. I have a lot of awards. And I always said my favorite award is When a child says, Mr. Campbell is the best test teacher, that for me is my best award ever. When a child said I'm the best test teacher, there's no word best test, it's my favorite word. Because what that means is that whatever I have done with, for that child, they want to be in school. They see care, they see love. And when you listen, let me talk about this. Why this work in racial justice? I could have spent time, which I don't do in my workshop, giving you about 16 examples, and I have them. Trust and believe, I have them, of issues. I want you to listen to me, educators, of issues that have happened, an incident that have happened to children, listen to me carefully, in our care. 6-year-old girl being arrested in our care. We couple 2 years ago, Halloween, a teacher show up in TDSB with blackface in our care. Caught a prom proposal in a school in Ontario about picking cotton in our care. Some black kids in a certain school scared of talking about their sexuality because of slur and racial slurs, but also homophobic slurs coming from educators as well in our care. So why this work in racial justice anti-oppressive practice is necessary? Because we want us all to grow and understand that these things are happening, and you and I, every single one of us, can be that important factor to make change. We can be an ally. Let's start with that word. We're so used to that word. Let's start with that word. We can be an ally. What is an ally? Who is an ally? Because I could tell you something. We have a lot of performative allyship. Let me do this so they could see. We have a lot of optical allyship. You know, let me march because they want to see me march, and let me pull up a placard. Sorry, let me make a tweet. And you feel like after you have done it, you have done the work. But we want us to go to the spaces of move from allyship and get into real advocacy, get into real activism, be all of those things. How do we get there? And so one of the questions I like to ask us, and we're going to go to a breaker room, not now, but a few minutes. How does racism impact my community? So what I want us to do, instead of a breakout room, I want us to do something. I want us to go into the chat. I'm going to open the chat. It's open. Make sure you're not typing privately. You're typing to everyone. And I want you to type in the chat. So as we record, I could share them and they could be on our recording. How does racism impact my community? And when I say my community, I mean where you live, where you eat, where you work, where you play, where you go to school, any space you occupy. How does racism impact my community? Jump in the chat, everyone. Let's talk about that. Jump in the chat. Thank you, Clelia. Racism is killing my community. That may be too strong for some of us, but that is facts. Let me repeat that. Racism is killing my community. There may be people here who think that it's too strong for you. That is a fact. Thank you, Kathleen. I see you. The feeling, the lack of sense of belonging. It leaves untapped knowledge and resources from racialized teachers. You better top up this stuff. Come on, everybody. We have 99 of us in this room. I want 99 responses. How does racism? Thank you, Mark. I see you. I see you. I see you, Michelle Grace Williams. I see that the low, Mark Robert, the low expectations, alienating our people, cold and absent. Ooh, wow. That one touched me. Cold and absent of community care. Lack of understanding of where people are from, creating division, low expectation of certain students, negative bias, causes anxiety. People are afraid. That's a powerful one. Thank you, Treva. Afraid. Continue. Decrease of our students' confidence and self-esteem. Limits our children's sense of safety and trust. Hinders the excellence in our community. The constant need to push through and feel a sense of belonging. Not creating spaces. Limiting our authenticity. People believe in check boxes the same as anti-Black racism work. Students don't feel a sense of belonging, stealing our Black joy, stereotype threats, division, hate, oppression. I love this one. Thank you, Natalie. I send you love. You said, my son. My son doesn't feel safe. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is where, for me, it's powerful. When we are talking about this conversation, and every one of us, we are sharing, we are listening, we are getting into the fact, and then someone in the crowd shouts out. That's what I consider your voice there. Someone in the shout out, my son. That is powerful, and thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for sharing, Natalie. My son doesn't feel safe and feels broken when hearing racial slurs from his classmates. I want you to realize how powerful that statement was. I didn't ask anybody to share a personal statement. I asked you to answer this question. But this is a power in your own voice. Instead of giving me another list, which we are actually supposed to do, so everybody's doing the right thing. There's a woman in the crowd that shouted out just now, my son is broken. Let me go back to the previous slide. A woman here, a mother here, Dr. Mairi Reed, Principal Gary, Diversity Coordinator Mairi, Professor Stephen Reed, Professor Clelia. A woman in the crowd just shout out, my son is broken. This is why the work. I don't want to get emotional because I felt that. I felt it like a woman in the crowd shouting out. So this is why I do what I do. This is why I do what I do unapologetically. This is why I do what I do without tiptoes. This is why I do what I do without Cinderella glass sippers. This is what I do and do not allow any work in racial justice to be mistaken as if I'm telling you a story about Rapunzel or Goldilocks. I want you to understand, as Professor Rodriguez says, it's killing my community. And so when we come to this space, the work is urgent. And this is the power in this work. The work is urgent. And as I know Mairi's putting in a thing in our box, we're talking about how do we become anti-racist? Because I want to share something with you. It's been over a year, to be honest with you, that I've not had to say to someone, it's been a good one, and I'm feeling very proud that I've not had to say to someone who have said, well, you know, I don't see color. Well, I feel good that I have not had to correct someone in over a year. I know there's still people there, but I have not had to come correct someone who have said that in over a year. And that feels a goodness on the inside for me. And I ask us, how are we continue to learn? So when we come to workshops on anti-Black racism, racial justice, you know, to talk about Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anything we come to, I find a lot of time we're uncomfortable because somehow I don't know how we get to think that the presenter or the speaker is looking at you and saying you are racist, because that's not what the speaker is ever doing. The speaker is saying to us, we are part of systems and structures that are inherently racist. And how are we moving? And you cannot just say, well, see my hand here? Well, I am not racist. I know you are not. I didn't call you racist. What I want you to do, however, is go to a level of becoming anti-racist. Moving out to that fear zone where you center yourself. I still see people centering themselves. I still people taking the mic and they're crying about something that they're trying to unlearn. I still see, and we're using 15 minutes to talk about your tears instead of the stuff. So we are still in a fear zone. And I see Professor Dr. Michelle Grace Williams, who is one of our professors here at OISE in the MT program, and she said there's a difference between non-racists, come on now somebody, and anti-racists. Professor Michelle Grace Williams, you have my permission. If you want to take an extra minute to say something, please let me know. You jump on mic, because I felt it, it went somewhere inside of me. There's a difference, because I think a lot of us, we're clutching on to a title quickly. We're clutching on to a label quickly. I want to be an ally. I want to be an advocate. I want to disrupt. I want to dismantle. I want to decolonize. And we have not yet understood the responsibility and the accountability that is needed from us. So I am hugging you close right now. Just so you know, every person here this afternoon, I am hugging you close, because it didn't pass on me that you are here after a long day work from 4 to 6 to do some learning with me. Don't you ever leave this space not remembering that Dr. Campbell see you. Hashtag, if you follow me on social media, you know what I'm going to say. Hashtag, I see you. I see you. I don't know why I'm getting emotional. I see you learning. I see you growing. I see you unlearning. I see you correcting. I see you raising your hand. I see you speaking up. I see you thinking, Dr. ABC, a year from now, a year ago, I would not have said this. I would not have, raised my hand. I would have not have disrupted. I see you doing it. And all I want to say to you is continue doing it. That's all I want to say to you. Continue doing it, because guess what? The journey from racism to anti-racism has to happen on many levels. The individual, institutional, community, organizing. Let me just say this, Mairi. I have to share this with you, Mairi. We are doing this work not of our own, Mairi. We're not doing this work of our own. We're doing this work as part of the leadership team of the Master of Teaching program at the University of Toronto. Let me kind of repeat that for a minute so you understand. This is institutionalized work we are doing. We are here representing University of Toronto, Master of Teaching program, the work we are doing. Watch me carefully, everybody. But I want to say this to you. Every single professor you see in this space is here on their own accord. None was asked to be here. None was forced to be here. None was said, you have to be here so we won't promote you next year. You have to be here, else you won't get this, you won't get that. Nobody here. So they are here on individual level. There is not one school board person here who is being forced to be here. You are here as an individual level. So we have to remember, as we do this work, we are being prepared to teach, and as we do this work, to be an anti-racist, the easiest place to start is with our personal action. We are, watch this carefully, we are called to act. Even when we are uncertain, unafraid, not fully informed, and uncomfortable. We are called to act. We're gonna jump in. Before I jump in, I want to follow how I'm doing this. Before we jump into this breakout room to answer this question, we're gonna have some talk again from Dr. Yolanda Sealy-Ruiz. We had 3 questions. And the first question she asked us when she finished her keynote, and we can send, I'm sure we're gonna put a copy of our keynote in our chat as well. And I see Mairi putting quite a bit of stuff there. How do our lived experiences shape the way we view the world? How does our institutions, regions, history influence the status quo you want to maintain or to disrupt? And the next question, which we are going to discuss in a breakout room in a couple minutes. What do we need to know and do to be equitable teacher practitioners? Write that question down, everybody. Take a screenshot of the questions, everybody. Write it down, take a screenshot of the question. But before we get into that, I want you to remember Dr. Sealy-Ruiz, our voice, she was our keynote speaker for the start of this work. And she reminded us an obstacle that remains is the fact that teacher education candidates, those specifically who are being prepared to teach in urban school settings, are not sufficiently and consistently encouraged to delve into sustained self-work to develop their racial literacy during their coursework and outside of teacher preparation experiences. We here at the University of Toronto Master of Teaching program, we are quite aware we have work to do. That is why we're invested in this work. The onus is on us as teacher education programs to lead the change that must happen in schools. Teacher education programs must take their fair share of responsibility to develop a new generation of anti-racist, anti-oppression, equity-focused educators. I hope you're reflecting on this. I hope we're reflecting on this. I want everybody to make sure they're reflecting on this. I hope you're reflecting on this. Candidates need to examine their fear, excavate their biases, and be honest about the racist ideas and practices they know exist in schools. Thus, teacher educators must develop their racial literacy. That's talking to me now. That's talking to me now. That's talking to me. It's saying, dear Dr. A, let me read it. Let me paraphrase it the right way. Dear Dr. ABC, you need to ensure you are developing your racial literacy if you are going to develop the racial literacy of teacher education candidates. Dear Professor Mairi Reed, you need to ensure you're developing your own racial literacy if you are to develop the racial literacy of your teacher candidates. Dear Dr. Stephen Reed, you need to make sure you are developing, dear Michelle Grace Williams, dear Jeff Stickney, dear Ken McNeely, dear us. I want you to realize that. Last quote, racial literacy in teacher education calls for self-reflection. That's why I just did those dear letters just now. So we're going to go into another breakout room. We deserve one. We deserve one. And I want us to talk about this final question. What do we need, to know and do to be equitable teacher educators? What do we need to do? Let's talk about what do we need to do. What can we do better? What do we need to do to ensure? These are questions from Dr. Celie Ruiz. Let's have a conversation. I'm going to put a solid time on the clock for us to have this conversation. So we're going to stop here. We're going to go back in our breakout rooms. We're going to talk to each other. I'm going to recreate the breakout rooms. Wonderful. And we're going to have some conversation with each other. Let's talk to each other. Let's talk to each other. The question is in the box there. The question is in the box. The breakout room is open. We're going to spend about 8 solid minutes on the clock. Want to share with each other. And then before we go into the breakout room, because we don't record breakout rooms, I want to say thank you to everyone who is sharing from your heart in the breakout room, which means everyone. I have been into a couple of breakout rooms. I saw you. I heard you, Teresa Acosta. Thank you. Good to meet you. I heard you in your room, Gary. I heard other people sharing. I heard people sharing in their room. Continue to do that. And as you share, I want you to make sure you honor people's sharing because there's wisdom in the room. And I hope you did not come here just to hear from me because there's so much wisdom. I hear from Mairi. There's so much wisdom coming out in the breakout rooms. 8 minutes on the clock, not a minute less. Let's talk. Breakout rooms are open. All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Thank you so much for sharing. I see you. I keep seeing new faces and old faces and faces I've seen. I see you, Misha Hunter. I see you. I see you. I see you. I've seen faces. Thank you so much. We're going to jump right into listening to some words from our keynote speaker. As I said, we did this work with a keynote, and we're going to get into that part of the conversation, and then we're going to move on. Mairi's going to come in and we're going to have another set of conversation. Let's get into this part.
And Uncle Jimmy said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed.
Give us a minute. Give us a minute. Yeah.
And Uncle Jimmy said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And again, I thank OISE for being willing to face what is and to make it a prominent. And Uncle Jimmy said, a prominent platform for which you seek to develop your teachers. And that is, in this country at least, and OISE in Toronto and in Canada, perhaps the history goes back even deeper as we think about our Indigenous brothers and sisters. But in this country, particularly around Black people, those of African ancestry and descendancy in particular, our inhumanity was scripted 400 years ago. A little bit over 400 years ago, specifically in 1619. And this, in this country, and I would argue worldwide, is what we are resisting. Because it takes a lot to unravel what has been solidified in policy, in practice, and in all of the systems that we engage with. Our education system, our healthcare system, the juvenile justice system is all influenced by chattel enslavement and the belief that some are less human and others and therefore should be dominated. And this is why in 2022, you have your teacher education program talking about anti-racism, uncovering issues of oppression, and wanting you to be anti-racist, anti-oppressive, loving, humane teachers of the new generation. So I want to share this very brief video. We'll have some video. I'll tell you, you should have something to write something down. If we have more time, I would have you talk to each other. But for today, we're going to, since we're talking about archaeology of self, be a bit reflective internally. And Andrew also has three questions that I shared that you will unpack over your next couple of days connected to doing just some self-archaeology. But I want to take a look at specifically how racism, the cousin of racism, manifests in the four eyes of oppression.
Oppression. It's a word that's often used as a blanket term, but there's actually a whole lot more to it. There are four interlocking aspects of oppression: ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. And it might seem like a small difference, but it's very important to be able to distinguish between each kind, because understanding oppression is the first step to fighting it. Let's start with the core at the heart of every form of oppression: ideology. Every system of oppression comes from the idea that one group is somehow better than another. Ideological oppression starts when the dominant group associates positive qualities with itself and negative qualities with the marginalized or othered group. Ideological oppression describes the deeply ingrained social root of inequality. It's the larger overarching idea that leads to the isms. For example, the idea that Black people are dangerous is ideological racism. The idea that poor people are lazy is ideological classism. Ideological oppression leads to institutional oppression. Institutional oppression is the way that systems and institutions manifest the dominant ideology. Institutions control access, who is able to get to what and how. This includes legal rights, police practice, access to medical care and education, public policy, political power, and media representation. For example, when women make 2/3 of what men make, that's institutional sexism. When a building is constructed without wheelchair ramps, that's institutional ableism. All of this leads to interpersonal oppression. Interpersonal oppression is probably the easiest to recognize because it happens all around us. Interpersonal oppression is the way that people play out discrimination and violence on each other. It can take the form of microaggressions, jokes, stereotypes, and harassment. For example, when a student is bullied for being gay, it's interpersonal homophobia. When a Muslim person is told that they're a terrorist, it's interpersonal Islamophobia. And all those forces, ideological, institutional, and interpersonal, lead to internalized oppression. Internalized oppression is the way that people with marginalized identities internalize narratives of their own inferiority. It's what leads people to feel less than. This is the end goal of oppression. The oppressive party doesn't need to exert force any longer because the marginalized group is enacting oppression on itself to maintain the status quo. It's important to remember that it's never a marginalized person's fault that they feel internalized oppression. It's simply what happens when someone faces negative stereotypes, low expectations, and ongoing discrimination. So, for example, an immigrant feeling embarrassed about having an accent is internalized xenophobia. When a trans woman feels that they can never be a real woman, that's internalized transphobia. So, to review, the 4 I's.
So we stop there, everybody. We stop there. What I want to do at this time, we're going to turn over to Mairi. And Mairi is going to get into a conversation with us about becoming interrupters. We have had a lot of conversation about so far. And now we're getting close to the end, becoming interrupters of inequality, inequity, racist and oppressive practices in school. Mairi, it's over to you.
Thank you. So I want to make sure that we have some time to really talk about the everyday practice of how we embody this and live this in our everyday life, and being clear that this isn't just, like Andrew said, about work. This is about us in all of our lives. So becoming interrupters of inequality, equity, racism, and oppressive practices within our schools is what we're talking about. So I'm going to invite you to just think for a moment. What has action meant to me? And what could it be? One of the things that Celie Roux has asked us to think about when she talks about the 3 tenets is and I'm talking about reflexivity, the thinking about how we think. She points out that this needs to be more than deconstructing. It needs to also be reconstructing. That sometimes in the practice, we get very good at pointing out the things that are a problem, but there isn't as much time held for the building. Lila Said talks about this too, author of Me and White Supremacy talks about this as well, about the deconstruction and the building. So part of what we can also think about is, have I been a part of one more than other, and how have they been? Where has the imbalance been? One of the things that Celie Roux also points out to us is that this work needs to be in conversation with others. It needs to be relational. The personal piece is profoundly important, which she calls the archaeology of the self. But she also invites us to be in relationship and conversation with each other about this, right? What are the ways that we can practice talking about this and engaging with other people? What does that offer us? Well, it does a number of different things. It offers us the opportunity to practice talking about it, being in relationship, and having the opportunity to have that reflected back to us as well. When someone will say, this is a problem. The way that you've talked about this is a problem. It's missing something, right? That experience. But let's be honest. One of the things that often holds us back from these conversations and doing this work is the fear that we're going to make a mistake, right? What happens when that happens? Well, so we're going to make mistakes. That's going to happen. So how can our action include our practice around repairing relationships when we cause harm? And that, some of the things that we learn from abolitionist movements, for example, is that, when we're really deep in this practice, I'm thinking about conversations that have been hosted by Rania Al-Magramar, for example, that when we have been harmed, sometimes part of our healing process includes harming others. So how can we be in relationship with one another in a way that really holds one another, that's really going to care for those moments when harm is exchanged? How can that be a part of it? And Sonia Renee Taylor calls on us to be that part of our action is to practice being someone who can be called on to act, but also can be responsible for when we've caused harm. That someone can come to us and say, there has been a problem. This has happened, right? So when we're thinking about the action of becoming interrupters, we're thinking about interrupting ourselves, we're thinking interrupting our systems. We're thinking about deconstructing, we're thinking about reconstructing. And this can be really painful. This, some of the stories that folks shared, I'm thinking of what Mary Reed shared about the memory of not acting. The story that I was going to share is I remember being, some of you may be from Caledon. I grew up in the Caledon area, not known for its diversity 40 years ago. And when I was my youngest child, age of 10, and went to a public school in that area, there were 2 Black children in that school. There were 2 South Asian children in that school. I don't know the countries they came from, so I'm going to be vague. And when I think about the fear that I embodied, the fear that I lived within, I also think about how that focus on protecting myself took me out of action, showing up for other people. I traveled year after year after year with someone who is from Central America, I won't say the country, someone who is from the Pacific Islands, who I won't say the country. And it also meant I did not show up when things were said. I didn't even recognize the possibility that if we had had each other's backs, if we had been in relationship and community with one another, that we could have done something, that we could have moved something, right? And so I invite us also in our thinking about how we're thinking, and thinking about how, and Celie Ruiz offers you in the article that Andrew sent you, also this possibility of, everything being based in what she calls critical love. She calls this the foundation, right? She calls this the absolute foundation of this work. So how do we also face the moments that are harder for us to love all the people who we're teaching? Where the ways that our love has been restricted, the ways that our love has been harmed, right? And I see what Chloe is saying about, because we are catering to white fragility and discomfort so often, that we shift ourselves and move ourselves around so constantly into shapes that are not us, and not having the same opportunity to be us. So what action also includes is that process of embracing who we are outside of that. Yeah. So I want to think very tangibly and practically also in this conversation. And, this is this is not a model that has anything to do with this, but it's something that a number of the students who I've worked with over the last couple of years have found very helpful when you think about bringing it into a day-to-day practice of how do I embody this? How do I do this? Right? How do I make sure that I'm creating habits and rhythms regularly in my work to be thinking about whose voice am I centering? How am I centering it? How am I doing this? Right? To make sure that it is a regular process. So on the screen, for those who don't have sight available, there's 3 circles, one inside the next. Center circle simply says, what can I control? What do I have the control over? So where are the places where I can create regular habits? Every unit I teach, whose voice is being centered as the knowledge, as the wisdom? Am I constantly centering text? Is there other forms of knowing? Am I only centering concepts of research or community knowledge and wisdom as well? What are the ways that I can challenge that I can have agency to practice the action of destabilizing these 4 eyes that Celie Ruiz's video offers us, right? So what are the things I control? What are the things that I influence? And I really invite folks not to negate the importance of what influence is. Sometimes when this gets offered as a thought process, we end up thinking that it is all about the things that we can control and to let go of the other things. And I really want to offer, and this comes back to that piece about advocacy, right? You think about the power of, again, people coming together, lending their voices together to a particularized action. we think about the Ibram X. Kendi's book on how to be an anti-racist, one of the things that he talks about in that text is also about how we create a context in which the deciding power's best choice is to, in fact, be anti-racist. How do we, well, we do that through community and relationship and using the influence that we have. So I invite you to think about where are the places where you have influence and how are you using, how could you use that influence, right? I also want to really make sure that we're thinking about that in really complex intersectional ways, because you know, one of the things I'm doing a lot of thinking about in my own life is the ways that I have perpetuated so much ableism in my work and in my life. And even as someone who's a member of a disabled community, you know, I've often thought about activism in a very particular way that involves things that people in my life who are activists have taught me. That's a limited way of thinking about things. So I also invite us to really open and breathe and think about, be in conversation with learning from lots of different people about what does control mean, what does influence mean, and making sure we're thinking about that. The final thing is, what are the things that are outside of my control or influence right now? So, okay, these things might be currently outside of my control or influence, but I invite you to be pointing at those things and saying, are there things that I want to put a plan in place to be able to address those things? What are the things that are possible? And this brings us to the next slide. I'm going to read the quote on the slide. It's by Yolanda Seeley-Ruse, and it says, "This racial divide between educators and students poses severe challenges to changing the status quo. Eradicating racist structures, the ill effects the racism has and continues to create, will require that scholars, educators, and policymakers engage in what Bettina Love called freedom dreaming, imagining, creating creative, new, and effective ways to bringing equity to a system that was not designed to be equitable." Right? It matters how pre-service teachers are prepared by teacher educators. So I want to hold on this notion of freedom dreaming. What is possible? Taking the cap off what is possible. It's not just the deconstructing, it's the reconstructing, but how do we understand what to reconstruct? We need to be able to dream. And one of the most profound and painful experiences I have kept on coming across in my work, I come to you as a youth worker who's spent a lot of time in the field in conversation with young and developing humans and having the privilege to learn with them as they grow. And it is the loss of the ability to dream of something else that stays with me the most. The capping on possibility at such young ages that stays with me. So this practice of imagining creatively new and effective ways of bringing equity into a system that was not designed to be equitable is profoundly important. And there's a couple, so I encourage you to check out the work of Bettina Love. Also, there's a recent book by Sean Ginwright called The Four Pivots. I'll also put that in the chat for folks who want to think more and learn more and be in conversation more about that work. So I invite us to just take some time to be with what we've talked about. We're going to do one final breakout room for folks to be able to be in conversation about action, sharing your ideas, learning from one another, having designated time to really focus on how do we put this into action. So we have 10 minutes in this conversation, and then we're going to come back. Very brief close up, but I want to make sure you have lots of time to talk to one another. So we'll see you back in a few minutes. Your hand is already up.
I just had a quick question about the chat. Well, because I got bumped out, I lost all the links and the shares. Is there any way to get those links and shares?
I have been going along and adding, as we've been discussing, I've been adding things that were listed and resources from the chat into the handout. And when Dr. ABC starts talking again, I'm actually going to re-upload that. So it's going to have a whole bunch more resources at the bottom of it. Yeah,
great.
Thank you for asking, Jennifer. I'm sure other people were wondering that too. So folks, I just invite you to take a moment, think about, breathe it, feel it, embody it. What were some of the things that came up? Is there anything you want to share? Was there something new? Was there something you're doing that you realize, or you just want to share as a powerful, important practice? Again, the focus is on action. How do we do this day to day? How do we have a practice that is embodied and constant? So I just want to hold in case there's any, and again, just a side note, thank you for some of the private messaging you've been sending me. Some of your messages are funny, they're great, just beautiful, and thank you for some of the side conversations going on about how people are feeling, and there's been some lovely things. And also about the pain, I want to acknowledge the comment that Clelia put in about her visit to the TDSB with a little kiddo who was assumed to not have voice. Like, what does that mean that we assume someone doesn't have voice, and what it means when we hear a familiar voice, and what that means to turn to that son, right? Is there anything else anyone wants to share? Okay, with that, I pass back to you, Dr. ABC, and I say thank you for the conversations, whether we can tell or not on the outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was in a couple of rooms, and as I was exiting one of the rooms, what I heard, the statement I heard in exiting the room was, who is seen, who is centered, who is celebrated. I know it sounds like a poem for some schools, and it's like a mantra for other schools, but I heard who is seen, who is centered, who is celebrated. See Dr. Clelia Rodriguez's statement speaking on pain, poverty, and oppression. There's work for all of us to do. There is work for all of us to do. And in closing this afternoon, I want to remind all of us that there's work for us to do. There's actions for us to take. There are many ways, I've always said this, there are many ways for us to disrupt and dismantle. There are many ways for us to disrupt and dismantle. What is it that you can do? What is your way? What is your power? What is it that you do well? I know you're surprised I said that. What is it that you do well that you can use to do this work? Are you an artist? I remember the first time I will never forget 2020, I spoke at Peel District School Board Anti-Racist Symposium. I will never forget, and I met amazing people from Peel. But while I was doing the talk, there was this person who scribbled and did arts and did all kind of stuff. You know, that's their magic. And it was so powerful. When it finished, she posted to everybody and gave me a copy. It was magic. I still have it. It was magic. And I said to myself, I hope this person is using her gift of art, scribbling, listen to a speaker and just scribble, and only to go on Twitter and find her and follow her and see the work she has been doing. What is it that you do well? Are you into arts and drama? I always tell a story of how I've used dance to teach children a sense of belonging. What are you doing in your school, in your classroom, in your area? I see professors here. I see community leaders. I see principals. I see teachers. I see superintendents. I know you. I see you. And I see so many school boards have been represented. Some of you came in a little bit late. We were at high at 105, and every single board represented. Then I saw Algonquin Lakeshore, by the way. So big up Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic District School Board. Done so much good work with you as well. Big up to see you. So I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. Thank you for joining me in this journey. I want to say to you, continue learning and learning. And I know I have one more minute before I go to say something. I always share the story. Teresa, Jenny, Kamala, I see you, Kamala Reed. I see you, Freedom. I see you, Vanessa. I always share the story of when I came to Canada and I was downtown Toronto. and I heard a whole bunch of stuff about a set of people that I've never seen. I always share the story. I was downtown Toronto 2008 when I came to Canada, and I saw some people standing up, a certain spot, and they looked different to me. And of course, I am different. And I asked a few persons, who are these people? And within less than 10 minutes, I got a lot of learning about Indigenous First Nations people. And every single thing I heard was negative. I will never forget. I've told the story maybe 50 times. And I couldn't forget. I walk away because I couldn't understand, because I'm from Jamaica, where the Indigenous people of Jamaica had a genocide, destroyed. We have no Indigenous people in Jamaica. And I come to Canada and see Indigenous people. So immediately I was going, wow, these people serve. All I saw was power. Power. All I saw was power. I said, these people survived. But what I got was nothing powerful. Was deficit, destruction, loss of dignity. All I got was a negative. And you know what I did, Teresa? About 6 years into that, I saw they were doing AQs, because I now became a teacher in Toronto. Let me tell you this personal story before you go. And I signed up for my first AQ in learning about First Nations, because I really want to unlearn. It wasn't about the money. I know this video is being recorded, and many of our teacher candidates, as you're listening, I get it. You want to do an AQ because you need to go up the salary scale. I get it. Don't think I don't get it. Let me put my hands up. I got it. But for me at that time, it wasn't about that. It was about, I need to unlearn. And I did the first AQ in Indigenous education studies. And I remembered I left that class, Jenny, some nights I was angry. 2 nights I left that class crying. Another time I left the class like thinking, are you kidding me? And I just kept learning, just kept learning, just kept learning, just kept unlearning. And that learning went to another AQ. What am I saying to you? There's so much for us to learn and to unlearn. There's so much that is happening around us in racial oppression and poverty, as Dr. Cleda Rodriguez says, and oppression. How are we doing it? And I've always loved when I hear from Dr. Cleda says, politically listening. I will never forget when the first time I heard that term, and I said, what does that mean? And I've come to understand, are we listening politically? Are we in tune? Do we understand the urgency of this? Do we see the little boy and girl and other child in our class and realize that they are scared, they are hurting, they don't feel safe, there are issues? How can you offer healing and care and love? So that's why we did this workshop this afternoon. So we continue to learn, we continue to grow. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for being here. I am having another session, the final session on March the 6th. Make a note of it. March the 6th for all our teacher candidates. So we're inviting our year 1 teacher candidates to come in here March the 6th, same time, 4 to 6 p.m. But it's open to every single one of you and your peers and your community friends and your community leaders and your teachers. And guess what? I have to tell you this, and any parents. I was in a workshop with a school board. It's a school board. It's a group of schools. Sorry, a family of school in Peel, and I was so elated when the superintendent said to me, "Dr. Campbell, we're going to have some parents in the workshop as well." I was like, "Go, superintendent! Who are you mixing parents with principals and teachers?" And I was like, it was the most beautiful thing. And on the last day, one of the parents said how much she learned from it, just listening to teachers and listening to others and growing. So let us continue to grow. Let us continue to learn and let us continue to grow. Share your resources. See you again. See you again. Thank you. I see the box. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mairi, come on. Where's Mairi? Come on line with us. And we just say thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
you for all the little notes, all the little extras, all the little things, all the little questions.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's why we're here, to do this. So see you again on the, we're going to do the same exact thing, except it's going to flow differently. You and I know it's going to flow differently.
It's gonna flow.
It's going to flow differently. So thank you so much.
And Nick, your background's fantastic. Just saying.
Yes.
Side note.
Bye everyone. And I'm gonna have we're gonna post a video. This video will be posted on my website. So on my YouTube page. So go the same YouTube page I sent you the conversation from today. 2 of the videos. You go to that same YouTube, you will see this video. Of course, no breakout room is included. It will be up by tomorrow morning. All right. So go ahead and use it in your school. You have my permission. I've always been asked by people, Dr. Campbell, can I use a video? Every single thing on my YouTube page is for public consumption. That's why I don't monetize it. It's free to use. I have had the pleasure of principals say to me, Dr. Campbell, can I tell you that I've used your video in my staff meetings? I've been using them. And she said, and I smiled. I said, well, you're not going to hire me, right? But that is fine. That's why I created it. That's why I created it. Okay, let me stop sharing, everybody. The recording stuff. Thank you so much.